Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you might be joining us from. Of course, as we continue to celebrate International Women's Day, allow me to extend a special welcome to all of you on the special webinar titled A COP27 Springboard, Accelerating Women's Leadership for Climate Action, Resilient Food Systems, and Family Nutrition. #Break the Bias. My name is Nozi Poshabalala. It is an absolute privilege to serve you as your moderator today. Now, this webinar and this conversation is made possible through a joint convening facilitated by the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, or AGRA, as we'll say on from here on, as well as the Office of the AU Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment, Her Excellency Josefa Sacko, who we'll be hearing from a little bit later, together with the Minister of the Environment and Egypt's COP27 Ministerial Coordinator and Envoy, Her Excellency Yasmine Fouad, who we'll also be hearing from later, and the former Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General for the Food Systems Summit and AGRA President, Madame Agnes Kalibata, who's also going to be speaking with us today. On their behalf, thank you for being here with us and making the time to tune into this webinar. Now, the context for this webinar is critically important. We know that women are more vulnerable to climate change impacts than men, as they make up the majority of the world's poor. And we also know that they're more dependent on natural resources for their livelihoods. All of these, which we know are threatened by climate change. However, we also know that even as we recognize this vulnerability, women are effective, powerful leaders. They are change makers in the context of climate adaptation, mitigation, and building resilience. And so with COP27 taking place in Africa, in Egypt to be specific, it's an absolute opportune moment for us to highlight the leadership role that women have played and continue to play and can play as we seek to halt and reverse the effects of climate change in Africa. And so today you're going to hear from influential women leaders from across the continent and the world and across policy levels, as well as from women entrepreneurs, as we together deliberate some of the policy options to enhance women's leadership and positioning within food systems transformation and family nutrition in Africa. Now, for those of you who are following this conversation on social media, let's amplify the conversation. Let's let the world know what we're talking about. We're using 3 hashtags today. #IWD 2022 for International Women's Day. We're also saying #Break the Bias, which we know is the hashtag for the year, and #Value for Her. Now, with all that said and done, allow me to also say we look forward to seeing your comments in the chat and encourage you to participate as this webinar unfolds. Allow me now to really extend introductory remarks, official introductory remarks to get us started. Madame Sabdia Dido, who is the head of gender and inclusion at AGRA. Now, as she takes to the floor, allow me just to quickly remind you that she is a senior agriculture strategist. She's a program director and global team leader, and has really been leading from the front when it comes to inclusive, sustainable agriculture, market-based solutions, value chains, as well as gender and women's economic empowerment, amongst many other areas. Madame Dido, allow me to give you the floor to extend the official introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, Nozi, and hello everyone, and hello to our excellencies, and hello to our women executives, hello to our women business leaders and the young activists and champions who are going to speak to us this afternoon. I'm really privileged to have these very few minutes to share very briefly what we do at AGRA and why this day is important for us. And in doing this, I acknowledge all the protocol, and I do also acknowledge and thank the fact that I'm actually standing on the shoulders of giants, women who have made it, who have plowed the ground, who have made the paths for us, the younger ones, and I would consider myself the younger ones, and I know that the younger ones consider me the older ones. So again, there are those who have walked the path ahead of us, recognizing Her Excellency Ambassador Josefa Sacko, Her Excellency Dr. Yasmine, Her Excellency the UN, the former Special Envoy of the UN Food Secretary General on the Food Systems Summit, my own president, who is such a fascinating example and motivation for us women who are in this game. So just very briefly about AGRA. AGRA is the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. Our mandate is about agriculture transformation and inclusive agriculture transformation. And our entry into this day, that is a day dedicated for women, is a day we remind ourselves of the progress that we have made, but also the milestones that we still have to walk to create the equity that we are talking about. So within the agriculture and food systems sector, we are really looking at how to ensure that women access the resources they need to be productive. We know at the moment that women are producing far less than what the male farmers are producing. And it's not because of the fact that they are lazy or they're ineffective. They are very effective. The real challenge is the structural barriers, the social barriers, the cultural barriers, but the market failures also around accessing these different inputs, agricultural implements, agricultural finance. So this is really what we are trying to break today. And this is the bias that we would like to bring, to break, and to bring this understanding to the rest of the continent. We are saying that women are good entrepreneurs because they have this urge, you know, to really try to make do with minimal resources. That is what entrepreneurship is about. Entrepreneurship is about creating new things. It's about efficiency. It's about building what doesn't exist. That's what women do on the continent every day. So we are building this entrepreneurial capacity within the agriculture sector, and our value for her platform and network is really to help create that space for them within the market and within the trade agenda, so that they have enough incentive and motive to really work towards growing their businesses, increasing their incomes, and improving the well-being of their families. This is the bias that we are going to break. We're going to break the barriers around access to finance. We are going to, together with our partners, break the barriers around access to markets. We are going to break these barriers that are actually around gender-based violence, you know, limiting women's mobility and capability to do things. And most importantly, we are working with the governments across Africa to anchor these in policies, to ensure that there is a conducive enabling environment where government is leading and the other actors are following in creating that necessary space, both in the legislative agenda, in the regulatory agenda, and within the policy space. So this is really what AGRA is bringing to the continent in the agriculture sector. And our call, of course, is for all the partners to join us in this journey of breaking these barriers that are holding women back. So with those few, thank you so much. I know my president is coming in with the official remarks. Thank you so much and welcome to you all.
Thank you very, very much. We're breaking the bias against barriers. That's the message that I'm hearing. And if you're tweeting, that's certainly some beautiful sound bites that we heard from Madame Dido that are worth tweeting. I am seeing that the chat is going crazy with a lot of hellos. So I do want to do quick shout out: Mali, Rwanda, Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, Tunisia, Kenya, Zimbabwe. I see all of you. Thank you so much for making the time to be here with us. Now, one of the things that Madame Dido spoke about, she said, in breaking the bias, we're also going to debunk the myth about women and entrepreneurship. And women within the core of their DNA are creative, are efficient, are entrepreneurial. And so we're going now to our teaser panel, where you're going to meet 3 such women, young, energetic, vibrant women with their sleeves rolled up, doing the work. Allow me to welcome Adenike Titilop Oladosu. She is the founder of I Lead Climate. She's an ecofeminist. She's a climate change activist, and she's coming and joining us from Nigeria. So Adenike, I'm going to ask you to put your camera on. I'm also going to invite Diana Orembe. Now, Diana is the founder and the CEO of Nofeed. She is based in Tanzania, so we're going to hear from her as well. And we're also going to hear from Dr. Leah Bessa. Now, Dr. Leah is the co-founder and of Denova Dairy, and she is based in Cape Town, South Africa. So on your screen, you should be seeing 3 women. And Adenike, I'm hoping we'll get to see your picture soon. But let me go to Diana first. Diana, you are a researcher, microbiologist, who is revolutionizing the feed industry. Tell us how you're doing that exactly. In 3 minutes, as you give us your pitch, in 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Nosy. First of all, I would like to wish Happy International Women's Day to every woman in this room. I'm so moved to see all of you. I'm so inspired with every one of you, and you're the reason even doing what I'm doing. Many of you may not know that, but I will explain. So my name is Dana Rembe, as Novzi introduced me, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Nofeed. Nofeed basically is a biotechnological platform that's pioneering the future of food industry by upcycling organic food waste using bacteria as a cell factory to produce a protein biomass for the aquaculture industry. You know, currently aquaculture is supplying more than half of the world's seafood, and it's just it's just booming. But I mean, certain thing about aquaculture is that the 2 main aquaculture ingredients are facing a supply chain bottleneck. This is the fish meal and the fish oil. Imagine more than 300 billion small fish are captured annually to be grinded into a protein meal, which is called the fish meal, so that to be used for farmed fish. This doesn't make sense economically, and it doesn't make sense environmentally to take the fish out of the oceans to feed the farmed fish. So we know I saw that challenge, and as Nosy said, I'm a microbiologist by profession. So I decided to apply the science as a tool to solve this challenge. And with Nofeed, we are solving 2 major challenges: the increase of waste and the demand for protein. So we are using waste as a raw material, and we are using the bacteria consortium as a cell factory to degrade this waste into a protein that's used to replace the unsustainable soybean protein and the fish meal protein. We started this by 2018. That's when we commenced the R&D, and we introduced our first product on the market last year, 2021. And as I'm speaking right now, we already have fish farmers in Tanzania who are using our product who are using a sustainable protein to farm their fish. And this is a very good beginning and a bright future for the food system in general. So let me introduce this thing also. One of the things that moved me into starting this company just immediately after finishing the university is the number of the women and youth that I thought I could impact by doing what I'm doing right now. When I started, I was the one who was doing everything. I was going around restaurants, collecting waste myself, and I was really facing a challenge of waste segregation at the source. But as I'm speaking right now, I'm already working with more than 11 women that are helping me with this. They're segregating this waste for me and just calling me to come and pick this waste. So this is brilliant. It simply shows that women can do anything. There's no a specific job for women and specific job for men. And in order to tackle the climate crisis, we all must ensure that we all must first agree that this is not a one gender task. It's a task for all of us. It requires the women and the marginalized to have a place on the table. Through only that, we can be able to build a healthier, a resilient, and a thriving community, business, and the economies. Thank you so much, Novi.
Thank you so much, Diana. That's absolutely inspiring. A bright future for food systems. That's what she says is the vision behind why she does what she does. She is an example of women working for women. And what I call the W effect. You know, we always talk about the X factor. What about the W factor? And that is that amplifying factor that we see that comes through when women get to work. And of course, making sure that women have a seat at the table. Diana, that was absolutely excellent. Dr. Leah, let me come to you next. Denova Dairy, I know you co-founded Denova Dairy just last year. And what I absolutely loved was the tagline, creating the future of nutrition. How are you doing that exactly, Leah?
Awesome, thanks so much, Josefa and AGRA for hosting this amazing webinar. So I'm Leah Bessa and I'm the CSO of Denova Dairy, which is a new age dairy based in Cape Town, South Africa. And basically, Denova Dairy is on a mission to create nature identical, sustainable, and most importantly, healthy dairy proteins for human nutrition. And as our name suggests, we really want to introduce these proteins from the beginning, which is why we're initially producing these fundamental proteins specifically for improved infant formulations. So using our technology, which is precision fermentation, we're able to create the important immune regulating proteins to ensure that infants get the correct nutrition from day one. Precision fermentation is basically a technology which allows us to program yeast to produce specific proteins. So instead of yeast producing alcohol or carbon dioxide like you're more familiar with, our yeast makes nature identical dairy proteins, all without any cows, making our process more efficient and friendly to both the climate and animals. So basically my journey as an entrepreneur started with Gourmet Grub, which is where we created dairy alternatives using sustainably farmed insects. And this was a pretty wild journey. And it was through Gourmet Grub that I grew as a researcher and an entrepreneur. And I took all of these learnings and co-founded Denova Dairy with 3 other amazing young entrepreneurs. Denova Dairy is still a very small company, so our impact is still yet to reach scale. But as it stands, we're the first precision fermentation in Africa company to produce food proteins. And I feel that this is an impact that will be measured really soon because it opens a lot of opportunities for other innovators in the space to create and to innovate. And as an innovator and an entrepreneur, I really want to show the world what we can do in Africa. As we all know, starting a company in Africa does have a host of interesting challenges, with things like legislation and infrastructure and funding being some of the biggest challenges. However, Africa is a growing, unsaturated market with some incredibly big problems to solve. And these are the sorts of problems which innovators like ourselves and businesses are ready to solve. So good nutrition and the impact of climate change are 2 of these big problems. And it's a space that I really feel Denova Dairy will have a really big impact. And I just wanted to close off because it's Women's Day, and I feel it's important to mention that Denova Dairy is led by 2 strong female founders, myself and Joanie Simon, and we're both the scientists. So we're leading the scientific research of our company. And to date, we've closed an oversubscribed pre-seed round, which comprised of predominantly international funders, which I think is a really good sign for future investments for the African continent. And so I just want to say all of this in the hopes of encouraging fellow female innovators to believe in themselves, to break the bias, and to stand up and take their place at the boardroom table. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Leah. I'm seeing claps. I'm seeing a lot of nods on my screen as you're absolutely speaking. But climate change and nutrition, right at the core of what you do, showing the world what African women innovators can do. The first in your space, taking innovation by the horns, and absolutely loving the clarity of your mission and the clarity of that which you are doing for Africa and certainly for the world. Allow me now to go to Adenike Oladosu. And Adenike, now I know that your voice is a force to be reckoned with. Tell us a little bit about your work at I Lead Climate and how you're raising awareness on climate action and women's environmental rights.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here, delighted, and happy International Women's Day to everyone. And so I'm Oladosu Adenike. Thank you so much for that introduction. I specialize in peace, security, equality in Africa, especially the Lake Chad region, and I see the connection between environmental instability and women's rights. And what I lead climate action is trying to do is to try to see how women can have access to land. Because through access to land, which has fixed assets, it could help women to gain loan, to have access to loan facilities, because having loan facilities, you must have assets to make you have those opportunities. And through loan, you'll be able to have access to other basic resources such as fertilizer, seeds, and all the things that they need to improve productivity. You could imagine if women have all of these tools that are needed, how much more they could grow productivity, could help to increase nutritional content in our food, the quality and the quantity of our food. So when I saw this, I saw that there's a need for us to do more to address this issue. And through the fund from the United Nations Development Program, Nigeria, we're able to give women access to organic fertilizer because we don't want it to be inorganic so that it doesn't disvalue our environment further. So we want it to be organic, something friendly to the environment so that they could use to grow their crops. And through this, we're able to give women, especially the rural women, this access. And they were grateful about it and they were able to get much profit from their farmland. And when I got to such community, I asked about the state of the land that they have. And just only one person could boast of having the land, which he inherited from the uncle or the late husband. So it tells more on us that for us to be able to reduce or tackle climate change, then giving women access to land is a key resilience way at which we can use to combat the effect of the climate change crisis. I have a blog, www.womenandcrisis.com, where I get to shed light on all of these issues and our activities that have been going on. And also on my Twitter handle, The Ecofeminist, on Instagram and Ecofeminist, where I get to explain all of these issues that are happening to women and the way forward, that education matters, and also giving women access to land, it also matters, because in sub-Saharan Africa, where I am from, women produces 60 to 80% of the food production with limited rights to all of these resources. So you could now imagine if women are given this nutritional content, it's going to help to increase productivity, food security, zero hunger, zero poverty, and even help to better girls' education, because it's going to increase women's bargaining power. And that's one of the aims that we are trying to do, to see that we strengthen women's rights through the acquisition of
we seem to be
other
struggling
basic
a little
resources
bit
that they need for them to be able to share power and different things that they need for them to see. Can you now hear me now?
We can hear you now. Just as you begin to conclude, I know that the network is a bit giving us a bit of trouble, but did you want to just maybe make a concluding line, Adenike?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I believe that if we could give women all the resources that we need, it's going to help to amplify more climate action. It's going to lead to a solution multiplier beyond tackling the climate change crisis. This could help to solve different issues that define us in our society. And so that is why I stand for women. And as an ecofeminist, I believe that creating a safe place for women and girls to be able to exercise their rights without any form of injustice is key and resilient to tackling the climate change crisis. Thank you.
Adenike, excellent. Thank you very, very much. And so as you talk about the importance of access to land, I know that Madame Dido is probably nodding, because as she's talking about those barriers that keep those inputs out of reach, we know that land is certainly one of them. I love your call to action to say, if we get this right, we move beyond just solving for climate change, but we potentially solve for future crises as well. So ladies and gentlemen, these are Africa's young women who are absolutely igniting us today. Entrepreneurs, sleeves rolled up, tackling climate change, tackling food system resilience, tackling family nutrition every single day through the work that they are doing. I do also want to just bring your attention to what's happening in the chat. There's been a lot of sharing in the chat, so don't get left out. People are sharing their details, their bios, their websites, and that's really exciting. You'll see, Leah, there's a question for you where somebody says, tell me more. I want to find out more about what your company is doing. So let's keep that conversation going. At this moment now, I'm going to move us from this teaser panel, it's just a teaser, as we now go into our official opening remarks. It is my absolute privilege to welcome and hand over the floor to Dr. Agnes Kalibata. She is, of course, the president of AGRA. She's a leading woman for Food Secure Africa, former Minister of Agriculture and Animal Resources in Rwanda. She's an agricultural scientist, a policymaker, a thought leader. We know that she served as Special Envoy to the UNSG for the 2021 Food Systems Summit, but also she is one of Africa's 100 most influential women. President Kalibata, allow me to give you the floor as we listen in to your opening remarks.
Thank you, Tsabalara, and I hope I have pronounced that right. Very good, thank you. Your Excellency Commissioner Josefa Sacko, thank you so much for accepting to host this event with us and for joining us. Your Excellency Yasmine Fouad, the Environment Minister of Egypt, thank you so much for being with us here today and for co-hosting the event. Honorable Ministers, Minister Geraldine from Rwanda, and other ministers present, I just want to take a moment to welcome you and to welcome the panel that we just had of young women, but also the upcoming panel of entrepreneurs from different institutions. We are extremely excited to be with you today to discuss two challenges really, but also to celebrate women. We've done so much as women, and we must take a moment to celebrate what we've been able to do together. But also we live under immense pressure and immense threat from climate change, and we must recognize that, and we must be able to call out some of the things we'd like done to be able to move our world forward. This is particularly important for us that work in the agricultural sector, where we see that 48% of women that are working in the rural workforce, if we might call it, is actually women. 50% of the 600 million smallholder farmers is actually women. But these women work against very difficult odds, especially because today they are actually up against climate change, as I said earlier. I want to call out three critical things that I see that these rural women live with every day as climate change increases, but also things that have been called out by the recently released IPCC report. The burden on women labor and the diminishing return on their labor. Just think about how many women are working in the agricultural sector, trying to produce food and more food for their children, trying to hope for increases in yields so that they can send their children to school, but can't do so because of climate change. Think about how many women have to walk longer distances every day because the wells they are fetching water from have run dry. Think about how many women have to make choices of what to put on the table, including eating last or not eating at all, just because the food wasn't enough as a result of not having enough. But also think about the disease burden. I grew up as one of those children that would have malaria every once in a while. And I was getting excited to see that malaria was being removed, completely gotten rid of in our villages. But it is resurging. And so many other diseases are resurging. So I'm extremely excited to see that there are opportunities. I hope that the African continent can make vaccines and deal with its own challenges will become real. Because you know what? We will have some challenges that are very unique to Africa when it comes to some of these diseases. But this is also a moment where we get to ask ourselves, where is the women's voice when it comes to these IPCCs and defining the needs, the rights, and the responsibilities that women have? We cannot be victims in these conversations. Neither can we just be considered caregivers. We are equal partners, and our voice needs to be very strong. So, but let's also talk about the celebration we are in today, what women are doing and how much we have achieved together. just starting with the leadership we have here around this Zoom room, where we see a lot of women involved in food security. You just had the business leaders. You're going to hear more, and there's the people that are leading on natural resource restoration, but also the people that are leading on climate change. Our biggest unsung heroes, of course, are those rural women who every day are feeding us, who every day are producing and contributing to the food that we eat. One young boy asked his father, he said, "Dad, why do you keep saying that you're the boss in this house?" And the dad said, "Of course I'm the boss." He says, "No, the person who is the boss is the person who puts food on the table. And I've seen mom put food on the table every day. So she's the boss." So here, let's break the bias. The bosses of our households are our ladies. But also let's celebrate what we achieved, with the leadership of Subdio, the work that we are doing with Value for Her. We just took on Value for Her as a platform to ensure that African women businesses don't collapse under the weight of COVID-19. And we've seen that these businesses have grown. We are removing barrier to entry. We are enabling opportunities for businesses to function better and linking them to markets. And also we are exploring opportunities of how they can link to finances and be more resilient. So we really appreciate the work that these women, like you just had, are doing. I also want to celebrate the Commissioner of the African Union. I did lead the Food Systems Summit. I did go into this recognizing primarily that I was an African trying to mobilize my continent. I would never have been able to do what I did without the support of the Commissioner, who actually managed to mobilize a continental position on food systems, recognizing fully well that our continent is the most vulnerable when it comes to climate change and needs to have a very clear stand on how we go forward. I also want to remind us that we are going to be hosting COP27, our COP, the African COP. And I'm glad that the Minister Yasmine has joined us here today. And I just want to make sure that we do understand the leadership, but also the weight on the shoulders of Minister Yasmine. All of us are expecting a piece of her. All of us are expecting her to work miracles. But I will not serve this continent right if I don't tell you the few things that we as women that come to this table expect from this COP. We need the world to act. We need to stop making it difficult for women to feed their children and for women to close doors to the children of their neighbors just because they don't have enough food to feed their own children. This is not African. This climate change is changing who we are, the very core of our cultures, and the foundation of us as human beings. We cannot accept this. We need the damage to stop because we need our world back. We need to build, we need investments in resilience and adaptation, of course, and we need food systems to be put front and center in our conversations in COP27, because for Africa, food systems is very critical to the survival of the continent because it is experiencing a lot of damage. COP27 is our COP. And Minister, you can be guaranteed and can count on us as women leaders behind you, but also as a continent, because you see, our survival depends on the actions that get taken at COP27. So thank you again for being part of this, and thanks to all the women, all the girls, and all you people that are on this Zoom room today advancing the place of women and girls on this continent. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. That's Dr. Agnes Kalibata, really delivering a very clear call to action, putting front and center what we want to see on the agenda and after the agenda at the African COP. That, of course, is COP27 happening in Egypt. Action, a return to our culture and the core of who we are, because this climate crisis has taken that away from us. For the damage to stop, for resilience to come back, and for food systems to be put at the center. I'm going to certainly, Dr. Kalibata, take away from this conversation, the person who puts the food on the table is the boss. So I certainly hope that we all remember that, and we're tweeting that. We're using 3 hashtags in case you've forgotten. It's IWD 2022 for International Women's Day 2022, hashtag value for her. We've just heard Dr. Kalibata talking about value for her, and of course, hashtag break the bias, and that is the worldwide hashtag. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to move swiftly along now and listen in to our keynote address. Her Excellency Ambassador Josefa Sacko is standing by to deliver the keynote address. She is, of course, the AU Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment. She's a former special advisor both to the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Environment in Angola. She's a leading African agronomist and is also one of the 100 most influential people in climate policy. And so with that, Ambassador, I'd like to yield the floor and give you the opportunity to deliver your keynote address.
Thank you very much, Nosivu. I think I got it right, or Nosipu. I got it right. Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon, everybody from Lisbon. Let me acknowledge the presence of my dear sister, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, and thank her for the invitation, for collaborating together to organize this event, this very important event today. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Minister Yasmine from the Minister of Environment of the Arab Republic of Egypt, and also my younger sister, Minister Geraldine, Minister of Agriculture from the Republic of Rwanda. And ladies and gentlemen, or distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol duly observed. Congratulations, great African women, as we commemorate International African Day. I have the honor and privilege to present this keynote remark on behalf of the African Union Commission to commemorate the International Women's Day today. On the onset, allow me to convey warm greetings from His Excellency Moussa Faki Mahamat, the chairperson of the African Union Commission. The theme of the year's celebration gives us an excellent opportunity for us to reflect on the new borders, thinking on how to incorporate women in the process of building more resilient food system after COVID-19 has exposed the challenges of Africa's food system, which are already burdened by other shocks such as the climate change, as was said by my sister, Dr. Kalibata, fall armyworm, and the pest and locust invasion in the Horn of Africa. As we are all aware, much of the work in agri-food system in Africa is performed by women. It was also said by Dr. Kalibata. In fact, a recent report indicates that 79% of economically active women across the continent report agriculture as their primary source of livelihood. As we are all aware that 60 to 80% of the food they put on the table are produced by women. 60% of the labor in Africa, farm labor, is being done by women. So there was a very important cluster of our society that we cannot talk of development or sustainable development without giving really a priority to how to empower those women that are really producing what we need to survive. The share of women labor input into the primary agriculture average is 40% in 6 African countries, namely Ethiopia, Malawi, Niger, Nigeria, Tanzania, and Uganda. When other post-harvest agricultural activity, such as processing and marketing, are included, those numbers increase to 80%, as we say. It is women who are often the custodian of local culture, communities, and cuisine, and they work hard to meet the household needs of food nutrition and income. Yet productivity of women farmers had the same access to productive resources as men. they could increase yield by 20 to 30% if they are given, it was so safe, they are given this opportunity, and total agricultural output by 2.5 to 4%, lifting 100 to 150 million people out of hunger and poverty. It is in a bid to change this narrative that the African Union commemorated the International Day of Rural Women last year, specifically on the 15th of October 2021, under the theme Strengthening Rural Women's Contribution to Sustainable Food System through the African Continental Free Trade Area. The event was highly attended by several dignitaries, including Her Excellency Saleh Work Zewde, President of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. And there was a call for action to address, among other things, the need to set up an innovative financing scheme that will enable African rural farmers to participate in and take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Developing a policy on women in agriculture. We don't have a policy on women in agriculture in Africa, so we need to develop this policy, and facilitating agriculture mechanization among women farmers by accelerating the implementation of national strategy for mechanization and sustaining the African Union campaign to retire the hoe to the museum, among others, and we look forward to partnering with various partners to implement this recommendation of our head of state. We need to really create a museum whereby women will not use hand hoe anymore. We launched this campaign in 2019 in Bobo Dioulasso in Burkina Faso. And due to COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, we did not go ahead, but we need mechanization. We need really, productivity on women agriculture sector. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the climate crisis is accelerating faster and more severely than previous anticipated. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6 assessment report released last year predicts that the world will reach 1.5 degrees centigrade of warming in 2 decades, much earlier than anticipated. While the link between gender equality and climate change is not always obvious. This is broad evidence that women and men are affected differently by climate change. Although climate shocks do not discriminate, women often have a lower capacity than men to respond and adapt to their effect. While female farmers are among the most productive section of the agriculture workforce, they are still disproportionately vulnerable to the effect of climate change compared to men, as they have less access to productive resources, services, local institutions, climate smart technology, and mechanization. Even though they play key role in farming, processing, and trading, with increasing degradation of ecosystem, women and girls suffer from heavy workloads, and as they force to travel longer distance to look for water, wood, and cooking and eating other forest products and feed. Those in turn increase their exposure to the risk of sexual violence, rape, and trafficking. Though the relationship between food system and climate change is increasingly understood, with food system adversely impacting climate change, and in turn, climate change affecting the sustainability of food system, the nexus between gender equality, climate change, and agriculture is relatively new. So we really need to focus on this nexus so that we can bring responses to our continent. Let me finalize by saying that while the adoption of gender-sensitive policies and the framework is in good start, concerted efforts are required to ensure their enforcement and adaptation. This implies the establishment of specific targets with measurable indicators. We need to set up monitoring and framework for accountability that helps tracking benchmark progress on gender transformation, on climate action, to ensure that the community are delivered. My department is fully engaged on participating and working side by side with the Arab Republic of Egypt in order for us to showcase during the COP27, which is the African COP, so that we can really prove that agriculture is the most vulnerable sector affected by the climate change. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Josefa Sacko, ladies and gentlemen, delivering the keynote address. And I'm seeing some reaction to your words, lots of nodding, Ambassador, as you're speaking. But just to maybe lift some of the insights that you shared with us, you spoke quite passionately about the intersection of gender inequality, climate action, or the crisis rather, and food system insecurity. And you're really encouraging us to look at these three things through the lens of intersection and not a single stand-alone phenomena, because if we solve one and not the other, we're not going to make the desired progress. What I'm also hearing you say is the importance of gender-sensitive policies. And so as we go into our panel discussion now, we begin to tune into that. Where have we seen gender-sensitive policies? What impact have they had? And how might we build on some of the momentum that we've begun to realize? You landed on a very important point, and that is on the importance of targets and tracking those targets. And you speak about benchmark progress. That's what we're looking for. And so that which we do not measure, we know that we cannot manage. And so I certainly hope that everyone has been tuning in to that really important and insightful keynote address. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sacko. Ladies and gentlemen, we're transitioning now into our high-level panel. Now, what I said at the beginning, I said your voice matters in this conversation, that we want to see your comments, we want to see your questions. This is the time where we want to see you participate. So please put your questions in the chat, put your comments in the chat, and I will try to the best of my ability to take those questions, to take those comments, and make sure that your voice is heard and you have a seat at this table as we have this conversation. All right, we are expecting Her Excellency Dr. Yasmine Fouad, who is of course the Minister for Environment in the Arab Republic of Egypt. She is of course the COP27 coordinator. She was previously Assistant Minister of Environment since 2014, and she will be coming into this conversation with over 20 years of experience in environment and international cooperation, working with government, working with UN organizations, working with NGOs, and working with universities. Allow me to also welcome the Honorable Dr. Geraldine Mukashimana. She's on our screens right now. She is, of course, the Minister of Agriculture and Animal Resources in Rwanda, and she has served in a multitude of roles, including education, agriculture, rural development in Rwanda. And so that intersectional lens is certainly something that we're going to be tapping her insights for a little bit. We're also going to have Madame Anita van der Belt. She's on your screen as well. She is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Development in Canada. And prior to her election, Madame has worked for over a decade in international democratic development, and she's worked in over 20 countries on inclusive governance and women's leadership. And so that breadth of experience is certainly something that we're going to be looking for in the conversation. Now, at this very moment, I'm not seeing Her Excellency Fouad. I will ask my team to give me an indication as soon as the minister joins us. But let me go to Rwanda first while we wait. Let me go to the Honorable Geraldine Mukashimana. Honorable, we know that Rwanda is really well known and is often cited as a very good example of policy coherence and what could be described as catalytic gains for women across the board. But specifically in this conversation, we've seen this is true for food security and resilience as well. The question to you, Honorable Minister, is what has worked for Rwanda that the rest of the continent can learn from and apply from today?
Yeah, thank you so much, moderator. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And I wanted, first of all, to thank Ambassador Josefa, Dr. Kalibata, and Yasmine for organizing this way for us to celebrate the Women's Day. So I think it's really not an easy question. But let me try, because I mean, for us as a government of Rwanda, we recognize that equity, inclusion, and fairness are key to building our nation, but I guess to building any nation, and especially for us as Africans. So first of all, it is really important to have a committed leadership for good governance, and then to promote gender equality and women empowerment. So as I said, it comes all the way from the top leadership to the parliament, because our parliament played a big role to pass laws and regulations that are giving a voice to women. Laws looking at inheritance, laws looking at matrimonial issues, looking at land regulations. So we really appreciate our parliament for passing that. But again, as a country, we are guided by many developmental agendas that puts gender and family promotion at the head of so many things that we do. And also from the constitutional level, we have opted from day one that 30% of posts in decision-making be occupied by women, and that set a precedence for us to have a voice. So I guess that's for the general situation, but when it comes to agriculture, I mean, we have a lot of women into the cooperative leaderships because we respect that 30% seat, and that help us to monitor what is happening in agriculture space. And I have observed that wherever we have a woman lead of a cooperative, whenever we have a woman entrepreneur who's working in agriculture or agribusiness space, somehow I think we are proud to say that they are up to the task. So again, in Rwanda, we have, in terms of land and other house assets, they all provide that there is equal ownership between a woman, a wife and the husband. And that's already clear so many things, because already having equal ownership helps the farmers, women, to have access to the land, which is a very big problem in African context. And over time, we have been observing that things are not where we wanted to be, but we can see that some improvements, because that co-ownership of land helps the women equally as men. We have been observing that giving land for collateral, we have equal numbers. So being a woman or men, we see around 47% of women and 47% of men have using their land as a collateral when they are looking for credit. And we have been observing that access to inputs, it's okay. They are also having equal number, and the ownership of, agriculture working in terms of crop and livestock ownership. We can see that 73% of women are into that activity. And we have a flagship program that we call One Cow for Poor Households. And we have been seeing women having more in that, but it's not so much to be proud of, because the selection criteria that we use already are poor. So that means probably that we get a section of poor women having access to the cow. So I think there are so many things that we can see happening, but as I said, we are not where we wanted to be. When we look at access to finance, despite all of these regulations that are in place, despite that our government has put a guarantee fund into what we call the business development fund, still given the literacy level, given there's still some bias into that, and having access to finances is still something that we are struggling with. And when it comes to access to finance and the resilience, you can imagine that having access to irrigation capacity, having access to mechanization capacity, we still see women lagging behind into those things that are related to having money. So I think, again, having a leadership vision and commitment to gender equity is a big asset that we have as Rwanda. Creating that enabling environmental conditions, I think it's something that we have worked for. And also the accountability mechanism that we have in Rwanda. We have an office that is having its role to monitor, we call it the gender monitoring office, to track every single office, asking what are the involvement of women, how much women are involved in this activity, in that activity. So that accountability framework is very critical for us to make such progress. Again, as I said, we wish to be higher than where we are, but I think working together, we can keep making progress. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, thank you very much. I think you've given us so much to work with, and I certainly am looking forward to coming back with some follow-up questions. You know, you've spoken about the importance of commitment, and that's certainly something that on International Women's Day, we always have to come back to say, to what extent is our government committed, and how is that reflected in the policies, the bills, and the laws that are passed? You've spoken about a range of different gender-sensitive policies, from inheritance policies, matrimonial policies, the land policy, which of course is quite big. I'm keen to understand a little bit more around this, the barriers around access to input from a financial perspective, the access to finance. How might we overcome that? Because it is about time that the private sector comes to the party. And so I'm so excited that we've got some CEOs on the next panel who can also speak to a little bit of that. But also, there's a beautiful question from Sharon. We're going to come to it a bit later, because Sharon is interested in knowing, how do we make sure that these policies work for rural women? And oftentimes we are blindsided, and we formulate policy with the modern city woman in mind. And how do we make sure that that isn't the case? So lots to come back on. Thank you for sharing the Gender Monitoring Office. That level of accountability is something that is quite unique and that many of us can learn from. So let me go to Madame Anita van der Bijl. Thank you very much, Madame, for being here. We know that Canada is a leading example when it comes to feminist-led policies. Maybe you could share some examples of gains from these policies in your country in particular. And I think what we're also listening in for is how we can leverage some of these learnings to advance the position of women in food systems in Africa. Over to you, Madame van der Bijl. Madame, I think you might be muted.
after these 2 years of being on Zoom, one would think that we could, I wouldn't forget that. I really do want to thank you, Nozi, and all of the organizers for having me here today for this really, really important discussion. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I am on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. And I also want to wish everyone a happy International Women's Day. It is wonderful to start what is my morning with such incredible women from across Africa, from around the world. And it is notable that our Canadian theme for International Women's Day is Women Inspiring Women. And I can tell you that I have been incredibly inspired this morning by the women that I've heard from, particularly the young women, the innovations around dairy and infants, the innovations around fish proteins and bacteria, the microbiologists who spoke. It is really, really incredible and inspiring to hear some of that. In terms of the Canadian experience, as you know, in Canada, every government policy, whether it's a policy piece of legislation, has to go through a gender-based analysis, and it's called GBA Plus because we also look at the wide diversity amongst women. So it's not just how it impacts women, but how does it impact different groups of women within that. And I think that piece is incredibly important. Having said that, we are not where we want to be when it comes to women in agriculture. Statistically, women are just under 29% of owners and operators of farms. But what we see, that number is going up, the number of women who are actually operating farms. The number of women working in farming is actually decreasing in Canada. But more alarming is that the percentage of land that is owned by these women operators is less than the percentage of land owned by men. And we heard earlier from Nigeria, access to land is an incredibly important issue. I would say in Canada, the very, very high price, the capital that is required to purchase land and farming operations and tools is absolutely a barrier. And one of the things we need to look at for that is the systemic underlying issues to the gender wage gap, to women's role in childcare. So Canada has been doing quite a bit when it comes to looking at alleviating those issues. So creating a commissioner for pay equity, for instance, trying to create a national childcare program. And those are, and also women's entrepreneurship. There's significant funding and programs that we've provided for women's entrepreneurship and also to help women entrepreneurs scale up, including scaling up for exporting, because most women entrepreneurs, while there are a large number of women, the operations are smaller and they're not exporting as much. So we have the same barriers and the same challenges that some of the others here have talked about. But on the urban side as well, we are looking at projects that will help in terms of nutrition, in terms of food production. Right in my district, we've provided funding for a high school to be able to have a community garden and then have nutrition programming around that. And the uptake by girls in schools on those kinds of programs is actually very high. And another area, which of course is directly related to climate, is trying to alleviate food waste. In Canada, there is a significant amount of food waste, not just by individuals, but by restaurants. So we have government programs to look at, particularly during COVID, how to divert that. But having said that, I also know that Canada is playing a very large role internationally in supporting women in agriculture and climate. So like the other panel members, you know, we know that for strengthening food systems, women have to be part of the design of the projects for any food systems to support climate action, gender equality, and nutrition. The better that we understand what's holding back women, the more that we can draw on women's strengths, because women are the best placed to help families adapt to environmental threats. And they're very adept at sharing new information, as we're doing today, building on traditional knowledge and engaging with the entire community to find solutions. So when something's so obviously beneficial, we really need to look at what is underneath in terms of impediments for change. But I would add also to look at the success stories, like some of the things that we heard today. So in terms of international support, Canada has doubled our international climate finance commitment to 5.3 billion over the next 5 years to help countries transition to low carbon economies and adapt to climate change. And I heard the call from Dr. Kalibata, who said, we need the world to act, because climate change is affecting everyone, but it is being created primarily by countries that have developed for a number of generations. And so we need to be acting on this. So Canada is putting that forward. And in line with our feminist international assistance policy, 80% of those climate finance initiatives have gender equality in the design. And that's part of the feminist international assistance policy. A few weeks ago, Canada announced 315 million for our Partnership for Climate program to fund climate action projects from civil society, Indigenous peoples, and other organizations. And I'm trying to see some of the chat, but it seems to me there's probably a lot of organizations right now that would benefit from that kind of a program. And these are the kinds of things that we would be supporting: are growing and selling local seeds and tree seedling varieties, sustainable forest management, bio-friendly alternatives to fertilizers and pesticides, technical assistance, data services to support the adoption of nature-based solutions in agriculture and food systems. So that's something we just recently announced. We also know we have to go beyond gender responsiveness and look at feminist leadership. And with that, we have to work very closely with women's organizations. And Canada is right now the #1 donor to local women's rights organizations around the world. For Canada, the intersection, and we heard this earlier, the intersection between women's rights and climate adaptation is a key focus of our international assistance. That's why we also just recently announced 150 million about a year and a half ago, and a second loan of 190 million at the UN High-Level Political Forum last July that will expand our support to small-scale farmers, especially women, to adapt technologies and practices that mitigate the carbon footprint of agriculture and help women farmers to overcome food insecurity. And I would just like to add that sharing of knowledge, the sharing of experiences like we're doing today, I think is incredibly valuable. I have certainly learned a lot today from those who have spoken before. I'm looking forward to learning more going a little bit later in the program. And I think that we can all do better. Every country can do better, but Canada is also very much looking to support those in other countries in sub-Saharan Africa in order to be able to support women in these efforts.
Madame van der Belt, thank you very much. And again, so much inspiration. So as you talk about learning from everyone, I think we've learned so much from the experience of Canada, a gender-based analysis plus, and how amazing that is a firm framework in place that really forces those who are looking at policy formulation, looking at where are the women. And in addition to that, beyond the women, you've spoken about some of the very many similarities and how interesting that women around the world actually encounter the same challenges. And so when we say #BreakTheBias, it really is a global call to action. You spoke about the challenge of ownership, with only 29% of women owning farms, the challenge of land. And as you talk about the high capital requirement, we ask ourselves the question, how do men access that capital that is required for that land? You've spoken about some of the initiatives around entrepreneurship, and not just entrepreneurship for small scale or micro businesses, but also for scaling up, for export. And that's really exciting as we think about women in agri-tech and women in agri-entrepreneurship. Community gardens and nutrition, something that is very much part of the African landscape that you've spoken about as well. And of course, talking about some of the successes we've seen internationally, I think a lot of embracing of the commitments that we've heard Canada has made in terms of increasing their investment, their international support for the transition of other countries to low carbon economies. But what I particularly loved is gender equality must be in the design, not an afterthought on how do we tweak the design to add the gender element, but it's in the design. And of course, the intersectionality that we've been speaking about. I'm going to come back with a few more questions, but I do want to say to our audience, don't let me keep these amazing women leaders to myself. If you have a question, please put it through in the chat and I'll bring it through. So let me come back. Honorable Mukashimana, let me come back to you. I love the question from Sharon. And Sharon was saying, how do we make sure that as we think about all these innovations around climate action, around food system security, around nutrition, that we also have the rural woman in mind? Is Rwanda intentional about not leaving rural women behind?
Yeah, thank you, moderator. There is no single way that the rural women cannot be included into this, because almost 53% of farming communities in Rwanda are women. So it's really, it's really important that we design policies looking at who is down there, who is farming, who is selling seed, who is doing the post-harvest. All of these things are looking at specific at rural women, because they are the doers. They are not just sitting there watching. They are the doers, and there is no way they cannot be included. And all the facilities that get down by the government is to make sure that the rural women are benefiting.
I think it was Dr. Kalibata who spoke about almost 68% of smallholder farmers in Africa are women. And so we're seeing that number to say, if we get it right for women, it actually means we get it right for smallholder farmers in general. I'm reminded of a quote that the former executive director of UN Women, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka used to say. She used to say, from a policy perspective, if you can design policy with women in mind, it means you've designed it for the world in mind, because if it works for women, it works for everyone. Let me stay with you a little bit longer, Honorable Mukashimana. I'm keen to understand this question around the barrier of access to finance. This is a conversation that seems to be just going around in circles. I have been moderating conversations for over a decade, and we are still talking about access to finance as a big barrier across all sectors, across all experiences for women. What needs to be true for financial services to reimagine their lending criteria so as to really lower this barrier so women can access finance? What are your thoughts on that?
I think when I speak of low access to finance for farming women, I think it's equally true for the agriculture sector in general in Rwanda. And then when it comes to women, you find that they are lagging a bit behind than men. But there's so many issues that are around access to finance in agriculture sector, because I think it's really a traditional way of looking at agriculture in Africa, because you feel like the agriculture in Africa is left to the less fortunate. It is left to the less educated. It's left to the person that is really there. And I feel like it is, we need to turn around that perception, because food is so important for all of us, the poor, the rich, whoever it is there. So thinking that the food is so important to me, but I'm going to be left to be fed by the less fortunate, I think it's a strange way of thinking. So first of all, I feel like we need to look at how do we magnify, how do we give the importance this food that is so critical for us to survive, and then building what is needed for the producers of food to give us sufficient, healthy, nutritious food, and then look at what is needed there. And then once you go in, you see that who is the majority of providers of food, who is the cooking food, who is serving food. And then you find that women are very represented there. And again, it's really important that we give the food its importance, but also who is administrating these facilities that we are speaking of. Traditionally, you find that these kind of sectors are managed by the people who are not even women. So as we design policies that are giving seats, decision-making to women, it's progressively one way of trying to make some progress. And again, I mean, when we go to agriculture sector, understanding the farming in Africa, it's really important so that this risk-prone sector that we all the time think of, we need to de-risk it and make it a risk-free sector so that we can get the food that we so badly need if we want to survive and care for the nature. Thank you.
Honorable Mukashimana, again, some really excellent inputs here. I'm hearing you talking about the perception challenge, especially when it comes to the brand of agriculture. And again, it maybe poses a question back to us to say, you know, have we done a good job of showcasing the entire value chain of opportunity to young people so that they really see that agriculture is not just primary agriculture. There are other activities along the value chain. I also like what you've spoken about the importance of de-risking and the kind of very courageous conversations we're going to have if we're going to de-risk the sector. I maybe want to just welcome back Dr. Kalibata into the conversation. If I can, I'm breaking the rules now, but I think that's fine. I'm going to welcome her back into the conversation. And I'm keen to hear from you, Dr. Kalibata, first to maybe give you an opportunity to react to some of what you've heard, but also maybe if you can comment, what do you think are the most important levers that we should be focusing on if we're really going to have a distinctive impact in terms of the strengthening of food systems in a way that really counts for women? Let me get your thoughts, please.
Thank you, and I'm happy to come back and really welcome Anita's contribution. Thank you so much for your contribution and Geraldine's contribution. Listen, when it comes to women, the Commissioner said it very clearly, we have a huge number here on the continent in Africa working in the agriculture sector. For these women to be able to be productively engaged in the agriculture sector, they must have access to the means of production that they need to have better productivity on the labor they are putting in. They are farming anyway, they are digging anyway. So how do you ensure that they have better productivity? And that means access to good seed, that means access to inputs like fertilizers, using them well. And more importantly, women need access to markets, and markets are probably one of the biggest challenges. Why do women need access to markets? They must buy clothes for their kids. They must ensure that some of those needs that men don't know about are met in the household. They need money, and they actually don't have access to money. So I think it's really important to ensure that when it comes to transforming where households are at, looking at the means that are available to households to be able to change their livelihoods. In this case, we are talking about the agriculture sector. In other cases, we'll be talking about other sectors, the SMEs that are working in other environments, being able to empower them. For these SMEs, the biggest thing is access to finance. How can women not be held, not be judged differently when it comes to financial access? How can they be judged, put on the same scale? How can they not be considered more risky than men? And that makes it, the agricultural sector is risky and women are riskier. Honestly, then that means at a point where the agricultural sector is only getting 5% of what is needed, women basically are getting nothing. So that's why it's really important to create these spaces and platforms and opportunities that allow women the extra knowledge they need, the extra support system that they need. And it's really good to see that there are countries that, again, here we are celebrating probably the best countries around how we look at women, whether it is how the Rwandan government looks at empowering women all the way and providing for them in every space of life, to the Canadian government in really finding ways to ensure that women are empowered from a perspective of making resources available to them. So that's why I'm saying we are celebrating some of the best in the world, because these countries have thought about the institutional challenges and barriers that hold women back and are actually working very hard to remove them. So those are some of the things that I would consider important.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kalibata. I think it's an excellent response, and especially, as you bring us back to the focus on access to markets. And it's interesting because, Madame van der Belt was talking about the giving entrepreneurs exporting capability and exporting capacity and scaling up. And I think there's a great alignment between those comments and hers. And it's quite shocking, as you're saying, 5% is what the agricultural sector commands from a funding perspective. And of that 5%, we can all deduce that women are probably not getting the lion's share of it. So, Madame van der Belt, let me come to you, because one of the things that you've spoken about, and I reacted to it earlier because I found it so profound, was the idea of gender inclusion at the onset, gender inclusion in the design of policy responses, in the design of projects, in the design of investment. And one would imagine that a lot of work has gone into changing mindsets, perceptions, and that translates into a change in behavior. How has Canada done it? Has it been kicking and screaming, bringing everybody on board, or have there been more effective means of making sure that those who are sitting at the decision-making table, formulating policy, are looking at the design and saying, where is the gender element before we conclude?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And it has been very, very deliberate, trying to put this into all of our governance structures. What typically would happen is when gender-based analysis was introduced is at the end, because you were not able to bring something to cabinet unless you could show that you'd done the gender-based analysis. It was that add-on, as you mentioned. It was, oh boy, we have to find how we've got women in this, and just sort of add it at the end. And we realized that. And so now that differential impact of programs and policies on women is something that is woven through. And in fact, we have an online course that's been provided for public servants to be able to take that course to think a little bit about GBA analysis, GBA plus analysis, not so much in the terms of women as beneficiaries, but in the terms of how the entire program, and this can be everything from a person who is a maintenance person in a building and the size of the ladder in terms of being able to reach things, to the fundamental policies and programs and legislation that we're putting forward in building that right from the beginning of the analysis. So this starts not at the political level, this starts with the public servants, and it is woven all the way through. Every department needs to do it. And there is a challenge feature. We found we needed a challenge function within the governance structures. So Treasury Board will actually say, when there's government expenditures, Treasury Board will challenge and say, was there a proper gender-based analysis done on this? Every memorandum to cabinet has to have what the gender-based analysis was. And as I mentioned, we don't just say GBA, it's GBA plus, because we know that whatever the different women will be differentially impacted. And so this is something that is built all the way through, and it didn't happen by accident. It can't happen by accident. It has to be very, very deliberate.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam van der Belt. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking of Honorable Mukashimana's earlier comments when she's talking about how they do a lot of monitoring through the cooperatives and women in the cooperatives, and how that is one of the ways in which to monitor and hold and hold the accountability. And there's a lot of alignment between what you're saying, because on the one hand, I'm hearing you saying we must make sure that the tools are deliberate, but also on the other hand, let's make sure that we empower those who've got the tools in their hands to actually then do the job of holding each person accountable. I want to pick up, there's a comment that's coming through from the chat from Madame Lindiwe Sibanda, who says, we are not where we are, so our generation got it wrong. So are there intentional programs and policies to empower the girl child to be climate smart and to become food systems champions? So the girl's child, as we begin to now think about the intergenerational element of resilience. Maybe Dr. Kalibata, let me get your thoughts on that. Have we done enough in terms of passing on the baton to the younger generations to make sure that they are climate smart and they are food systems champions?
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Lindiwe, for being part of this conversation. Listen, we are nowhere near to doing enough, because we only know that we are doing enough if we start reversing the curve on the empowerment of women, on the challenges we have all around us. But in terms of engagement, are we doing enough? I'll just say from what I'm hearing from this panel, but also what we did from the Food Systems Summit, well, we made it very clear from the beginning that we really can't have a summit that is not anchored in young people, that is not anchored in the future, because young people are the future of this world. And if we need to start defining how we correct some of the wrongs of what has happened, we actually need to ensure that young people are involved, including young women. So for me, it's really about how we engage them, number one. Number two, it's how well we listen. When we engage them, we also must be prepared to listen. So because we engaged young people in the Food Systems Summit, we actually saw a very good show up of young people at COP26, making demands with one voice, very strong voice, that they probably wouldn't have had an opportunity to do if they hadn't come together and really been around the whole conversation around what is broken. Their demand at the Food Systems Summit was, at COP26 was, we need food systems at the center of this conversation. We know that food systems are challenged, they're impacting the poorest among us, but also we know that they are contributing to climate change. So they had a very valid reason. So the lesson from that for me is we empowered them, we gave them the opportunity. They came up with a slogan, nothing about us without us, and that's what we need to stay with. We really need to make sure that young people are involved and engaged, and decisions that are made include their voices as well.
Dr. Agnes Kalibata, thank you very much. Sis Lindiwe, I hope that response has landed well. I'm going to break one more rule as we close off this panel. I want to invite back Ambassador Josefa Sacko into the conversation. I know that she's still with us. I know she's been listening to this very robust engagement. So Ambassador, maybe as a way of closing us off, has anything that you've heard in this conversation resonated with you? Has anything really stuck out for you that you would really want to lift up as a way of just reflecting on what you've heard before we close off?
Thank you, moderator. I will first of all like to commend the fruitful sharing that my sister, Minister Geraldine gave, and also Madame Anita. It's very, very, very informative and very, very productive. But my concern is I would just like to pick the point of my sister Agnes on the COP22 in Marrakech. It was, because since we want to link the theme of this edition of celebration, we are talking about the COP, and I want to make the alignment of this theme with what we are supposed to do in COP27. I think that in COP27, it was called upon that we should nominate national gender and climate change focal points to pursue the gender equality at the UN FCC process, because these dialogues, happen during the COP27. So it would be good if we can really build capacity or, empower our women, our women association to participate in COP60 during the COP process, mostly COP27, since it is African COP. So we should try to build capacity, and I think AGRA can, assist us at the African Union level in the department, so that we work together and then we select, some association so that we can discuss it openly, and then we can mobilize a lot of finance in order to have the smart, how do you call it, smart agriculture, so that to mitigate the effect of adaptation and mitigation on the continent. I think that is where we need to, because there was a call, but up to today, we don't see much participation of our association, women association in those COPs, So that is the way forward, to really be there and the discussion, to be there and participate on these type of activities.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think that's an excellent place to close off the conversation, to say, let's go beyond the words of commitment. Let's go beyond what we say we aspire to do, and let's make sure that women are at the table, they're empowered with the tools, and they're exercising their voice. We're going to wrap up this first panel now as we transition to the last panel that we have as part of this webinar. I do want to say a massive thank you to our participants in this panel looking at policy implications. Of course, the Minister, Her Excellency Dr. Yasmine Fouad, has sent her sincere apologies that she wasn't able to join us, and that they will be watching this webinar and engaging with the content of the webinar. Thank you to Honorable Geraldine Mukashimana. Thank you, Madame van der Belt. And thank you as well to Dr. Kalibata for allowing me to break the rules, as well as Ambassador Sacko for allowing me to break the rules and bring you back into the conversation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're into the final 30 minutes of our time together. And so I want to now invite a different panel. These are the chief executive officers who are championing the women empowerment agenda. And they're going to be popping on their cameras now so that we can see them on screen. We have with us Dr. Beth Dunford. She's the Vice President for Agriculture and Social Development. And this is, of course, at the African Development Bank. She's responsible for the bank's strategy, for lending and other activities in agriculture, for water and sanitation, education and health, as well as the bank-wide work on employment and gender equity. So I know that she might have some comments and thoughts on the conversation we've just had before we get into this conversation. Allow me also to welcome Madame April Whitman. She's the Global Vice President at KNOR, for KNOR at Unilever. And she, amongst many responsibilities, is very, very passionate about driving one of the bold actions to fix the broken food system. She's one of the visionaries behind the Future 50 Foods report, which was developed in conjunction with the Worldwide Foundation. And this, of course, aspires to be a tangible solution to decrease the environmental impact of our food while increasing the nutritional value of our meals. And so that's a really complex, it's a really complex challenge, but certainly one that we want to hear about how she and her team are going about doing that. We're also joined by Madame Didi Okonko Nueli, who joins us on the screen shortly. Allow me to introduce her in the interim. She is the Executive Chair of Sahel Capital. She's an expert on social innovation, on African agriculture and nutrition, as well as entrepreneurship and youth development. And she will be coming into this conversation when she joins us with over 25 years of experience in international development. And she's a recognized serial entrepreneur, an author, a public speaker, and a consultant. So let me get into, let me maybe start off with you, Dr. Beth. And I'm keen to, give you an opportunity just to bring your voice into the conversation, to react to anything that you've heard. I know that one of the big talking points in the previous conversation was around how do we reimagine or reduce the barriers to funding and financing for women. And then I'd like you to maybe give us a response to this question. We know that the bank is implementing a FAWA, which is a financing facility, which is specifically aimed at de-risking lending to women, SMEs in particular. Has the initiative changed the reality for women and the financing ecosystem. So let me give you an opportunity to lean into that.
Great. Well, thank you very much, distinguished guests, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol observed. It's been fascinating to listen to esteemed colleagues on the first panel and really hear your insights around gender, around agriculture, around climate. And just to offer, I think, a couple of thoughts. I wanted to talk about the bank's affirmative finance for our FAWA initiative, the bank's affirmative finance action for women in Africa. And so this is a Pan-African initiative, which is really looking to bridge the $42 billion gap in financing for women across Africa. And so really this leverages the bank's financial instruments that we have, but also guarantees, et cetera, from other funders to really get in there to see how we can guarantee and get more lending into the hands of women. We know that women are actually a really good bet when it comes to finance. They repay their loans. Women businesses aren't risky. So it's kind of weird to say we're de-risking finance to women, but I think there's a perception there. And so what we do is we go in and work with financial institutions to help them craft products that meet the needs of women and then help guarantee their lending. So to really incentivize them to get more finance out to women. And I think that what we've seen is we've been able to get almost $500 million out the door this year, which is really, really exciting for us. And that'll be reaching more than 2,100 women entrepreneurs. We're also really looking at how we build the capacity of women businesses to really get more into the formal sector, to be able to really access this finance. So we've cleared 12.7 million to enhance 17,000 businesses and farmers' financial and business managerial skills. So I think that this is really important, really looking from both angles to see how we can make women entrepreneurs more bankable, but also really provide the technical assistance to the banks to make them more womenable, and really working on both sides of this coin. And I think this is really, really important. I think that we know that only 23% of women have access to credit in Africa. And this really is a huge gender gap. Lack of land ownership is one of the key reasons for this. Lack of finance for women and farmers really keeps them trapped in poverty and subsistence farming. And this is really important in the face of climate change, which is impacting women farmers very greatly. So the financing gap for African women in agricultural value chains is estimated at $15.6 billion. And so, of course, they're running agribusinesses in the informal sector, making it hard for them to grow their businesses and benefit from opportunities in the formal sector. So we know that, as has been said by esteemed panelists earlier, that if women have increased access to finance, markets, and technologies, that food systems would be more inclusive and the global hunger gap would be greatly reduced, which is what we know we're all after. So just to give an example of how a FAWA is changing the agricultural landscape under the same principle of transitioning women entrepreneurs into the formal sector. In Ghana, we have a $20 million new FAWA project called Financing Climate Resilient Agricultural Practices. And it's expected to benefit 400 women-led micro, small, and medium enterprises, translating to more than 373,000 beneficiaries. So this is through a line of credit with EcoBank Ghana. And this support, again, comes with the technical assistance and especially climate resilient agricultural practices to help really women be able to improve their productivity going forward. They can have access to the supplies, the technical assistance that they need. And so I think that it's these types of interventions that we're really looking at, recognizing a big part of this is to really ensure that women have access to the climate adaptive technologies that they need to increase their production and increase their productivity. So thank you very much.
Dr. Beth, thank you very, very much. As you're sharing what the vision behind the FAWA, but also the impact that you've already had. This is really, really encouraging. I think for me, one of the biggest sound bites I'm going to take from that, how do we help financial institutions become more womanable? Because we always are talking about problematizing the woman as if she needs to become bankable. And you've debunked quite a lot of myths just in that short contribution, talking about, the perception of women's businesses being risky and actually factually revealing that that isn't the case. So I certainly hope that we might have a question or two for Dr. Beth as we continue. Let me come to you, Madam Redmond. I mean, if we look at Unilever, we know that you're reaching 2.5 billion people globally through your products. And this really is a manifestation of the agility and the scaling capability of the private sector. The question I'd like to bring to you is, how might we leverage this so that we can address the gender gaps in resilient food systems and nutrition?
Yes, thank you, Nozi, and thank you all for having me here today. It's an honor and privilege to be with such an esteemed group of powerful women. Happy International Women's Day to everyone who's on the call. So as Nozi said, my name is April Adams Redmond. I'm the Global Vice President for Knorr, or Knorr as it's known in many parts of the world. It's Unilever's largest food brand, one of the largest food brands in the world. And what we're working on the brand and in Unilever is to really create a food system that is healthier, sustainable, and equitable for all, which is a big task. But we know for sure to feed the world's growing population, ensure that Africa continues to have access to healthy and nutritious food, that fixing the broken food system is absolutely essential. So, business has a massive role to play in this, of course. And these are very big, hairy, audacious goals that Unilever has set for itself. But it will require strong leadership from all parties, not just business, government, NGOs, and of course, diversity and especially women to have a seat at the table to make sure that these goals get met. And against that, we really start with ourselves. So we believe that, we've got 150,000 employees, and we believe that, some of the strongest forces behind persistent gender gaps boil down to very harmful social norms and stereotypes that limit expectations of what women can or should do. You've heard much of that today. They're outdated norms, they discriminate against women, they're all around us, and they're deeply ingrained. And for anyone who doesn't think they exist today, they absolutely do, and you've heard many examples of that today. We need our women to be fully represented at the table, empowered, engaged, helping us make decisions. And our model for action is really around no woman left behind. So we want to make changes, and that requires us, as I said, to ensure that our own house is in order first by focusing on Unilever workplaces and operations. And that's kind of inside Unilever, including the partners, the suppliers, and the farmers that we work with. And of course, gender is at the very heart of that strategy. 51% of our managers are women, which is great, and 46% of our board are women, which I think for a company of our size and scale is nearly unprecedented. So I'm proud to say that Unilever, at least inside Unilever and filtering out to our suppliers and our farmers, is making good progress. And we believe that it's not just about equality, it's also about equity. They're two distinct concepts, but you can have representation, you can have women around the table, but if women don't feel included, they don't feel it's an inclusive environment, then it's not enough just to have, that 50-50 split. You also have to have equity. You need to feel that you can bring your full self to work, and you can show up in a way that suits you, your needs and your circumstances. So for Unilever and for much of the policies we drive, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Our focus is really around making sure that our protocols, our policies, the way that we recruit, the way that we put in practice equitable principles around how we work with supply chain and farmers are all based on this broader notion of diversity and inclusion. We've been focused on gender balance for over a decade, and one of the key things that drives that is making sure that the leadership is bought in heart and soul. So our CEO, one of the most diverse and inclusive champions in I think the world, really driving this from the top all the way down. We've got a global diversity board composed of senior leaders, making sure that the people that are being impacted are around the table making the decisions. It's data driven. We set targets, we monitor those targets, we report back, and we drive for continuous improvement. When I talk about diversity and inclusion and creating that equity, it's about well-being, it's about physical safety, it's about psychological safety, it's about knowing that your children are well fed so that you can do your job and you don't need to worry about your family and their needs are met. So putting in place those policies and practices that support equity for women is absolutely pivotal. Parental policies, support for women of all stages of their life, and of course, role modeling, mentoring, and making sure those women get the support that they need. One of the things that we do, is as I said, we support women farmers. We've heard the important role that women farmers play in the food system, absolutely vital and essential. And you've heard the statistics from the other speakers that they don't have access to finance. They don't have access to the technology and skills that they need to really ensure that their yields are at the level of their male counterparts. So a big part of what we do is we make sure that we put support in place for the women farmers that we work with. We make sure they've got support around sustainable and regenerative agriculture practices, the training, the support, the finances, and then also they're set up within supply chains that allow them to get premium prices for delivering us regenerative and sustainably sourced food and ingredients. That also includes a development and business and life skill program, which extends on to making sure that they have access to time-saving devices and food to feed their families. And then one other big thing that we do, I know we haven't talked a lot about it today, but the importance of nutrition. So we do a lot of work in Africa around really supporting education with women to make sure that they have access to food, nutritious food, and they can feed their families. Because as I said, a woman or a mother out there that can do their job if their family isn't safe and secure. So yeah, very excited to be here today and looking forward to having business continue to do its part in making sure that we can address the climate crisis, but also, I would say, to an extent, the gender crisis.
Thank you very much, April. That's Madame Redmond. Continue for business to continue to play its part. And what we've been hearing here is more than playing your part. We've listened to the different actions that Unilever is taking to make sure that its own house is in order, right from your own workplace policies all the way through to the suppliers that you work with, but also outside of Unilever, as you talk about women farmers and how you're supporting them through the training, the support, and even their journeying through the supply chains. And supply chains, probably another element that we haven't spoken about much today. But I must say that what is potentially most exciting for me, just listening to you speak, is the normalization of well-being, of psychological safety, of arriving as one's whole self. And I think that really we're seeing a transition from these things being seen as fluffy, peripheral, soft women's issues to actually becoming core leadership competencies. And we're saying, actually, there isn't a healthy business in the absence of psychological safety and leadership and well-being. So thank you for putting that on the table and doing so intentionally. So, Madam Dindi Nuineli, let me come to you, please. You have been a very strong voice in the support of Africa's agriculture enterprises, which we've been speaking about today. You run a business of your own. the question to you, Ndidi, is how can we incentivize the core actors, including the businesses run by women themselves, to really participate in building resilience in agri-food businesses? What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you so much, Nosy, and happy International Women's Day to all my sisters and to the male champions as well who support us. It's been an amazing day so far. This is my 4th speaking engagement. And I have to tell you, Nosy, that I am so excited about the momentum on the African continent around International Women's Day and the fact that women are taking the lead. Now, to address your question, I'm going to say there are 3 key roles that women-led businesses play, but also small businesses play in this dialogue. The first is the critical need for visible role models and individuals who serve as catalysts in the ecosystem. You know, I just came from an earlier session where we're still debating whether there's a need for quotas. And I said, by having an individual at the helm, by having even 20% of women on our boards or 20% of our large agri-businesses run by women, it shows younger women that it's possible. It attracts unusual suspects to the sector, and it changes the dialogue, it changes who's sitting at the table, and over time, it changes the ecosystem. So by being at the table, women, we are already changing mindsets, we're shaping biases, and if we come to the table each time with excellence and integrity, we have no hiding place. And so I think women entrepreneurs are heroes in my book, because every single day they deliver excellence and integrity in the food ecosystem. They're changing mindsets, they're changing biases, and they're attracting the next generation. The second is that women-led businesses have to practice what they preach, right? So everything that Unilever is doing, we are trying to do at Ace Foods, we're trying to do at Sahel Consulting, we're trying to do at Nourishing Africa, Changing Narratives Africa, the 4 organizations I've started in the food ecosystem. We're ensuring that our boards are 50% women. We're ensuring that our senior management team have strong female participation. We're ensuring that our staff feel safe. That means that we're putting in place systems and structures around sexual harassment, around bias, around toxicity, around bullying. We're also creating hotlines, and we took this for granted. We didn't have, hotlines that are anonymous so that people can report when there are incidences at the workplace. And these hotlines go straight to the board, and the board is taking it seriously. And it's important to create safe spaces. 2 years ago, I was an IWD, and I was giving a very passionate speech. And somebody asked, how do you create safe spaces for women? And I took it for granted that because I was a women-led business, that my organization was safe. And I had to admit that I was dealing with 2 sexual harassment cases involving very senior management individuals in my companies. And we had not created a safe space. So don't take it for granted. Put in place those systems and structures. And then the third thing, and I want to link it to the comments that both other ladies have made, is that we actively have to collect data and track the data. So I'll use an example. As an SME, Ace Foods is actually a supplier to Unilever, right? And it's amazing that you have a large corporate buying from an SME in bulk, right? And it just happens that they are. And one of the things I always tell multinationals is you also should actively track your supply chain. What percentage of your businesses that supply you are female owned? And what percentage of the produce that comes into your supply chain are cultivated by female farmers? By setting targets and quotas through your supply chain, you also break the bias and you also empower women. And you have to measure the data. You have to track and you have to set goals and revisit them over time. The same with financing, right? It's a one thing to say we have all these programs, but unless we're actively tracking, holding people accountable, creating incentives through our entire ecosystem, the supply chain, the distribution channel, we're not going to see the changes occur. And so I believe there's an important place for data, and data-driven policymaking then filters up to the government. And that's where you have AGRA stepping in and other organizations to shape policy that hold governments accountable for fulfilling their part of the bargain to create an enabling environment for SMEs, especially female-led SMEs, to thrive. So I'm starting to see a lot of excitement bubbling up, but clearly we need to handhold a lot more organizations, hold them accountable, and create partnerships across the ecosystem to ensure that transformation really occurs.
So, Ndidi, I've been scribbling frantically as you're speaking, because I think you've just said so much that is also a reflection of how we too can exercise our agency as women, women in business, women in policy, visible role models, practicing what we preach, but also making sure that data-driven decisions which lead to data-driven policy making, and we really then begin to move the needle as we speak. Now, unfortunately, I've got 3 minutes left for this conversation, so I'm going to try to be smart about it. And in being smart, I'm going to ask you all the same question, put you on the spot a little bit, and hope that you're going to give me an answer in a minute or less. The question is this: what is your personal recipe for empowering women? What is your personal recipe for empowering women? Now, I always like to see who looks the most ready when I put these unexpected questions on the table. I think, April, you look like you're ready to give us your response. How do you go about empowering women? What's your personal recipe in 1 minute?
In 1 minute, Nazi, I invest my time. So I have many women who I mentor. And my second key ingredient is I work hard to lift them up. I've been helped by many women and men throughout my career, so I make a real effort to reach down and pull people up. And I think my third ingredient is really being vocal, because I think very often for women, it's sometimes hard to speak up about difficult issues and issues that affect us. So as uncomfortable as sometimes that is, I put those issues on the table and I don't back down. Sure.
I give time, I lift others as I rise, but I use my voice and I'm vocal and I don't back down. April, thank you very much. Ndidi, what's your personal recipe? Let me come to you. I'm going to close it off with Beth. I see Beth is writing reams in response, so I want to give her a chance to finish. Ndidi, what's your personal recipe?
I believe in opening doors for other women. I don't climb alone. Open doors for other women. Ensure that women succeed you in your position. I have female successors who have followed me at LEAP, followed me at Nourishing Africa, followed its importance to groom people, women in particular, to step into your shoes. I don't join a board without stepping off and ensuring that a woman is replacing me on boards. And I ensure that I drag as many women into the room as possible and create safe spaces for them. And then I'm a huge sponsor for women, but I'm also a huge critic. I hold my sisters accountable, especially my sisters who I know can deliver once they're put in that place, not just with prayer, but with encouragement, with support, and sometimes the tough love, because I want to make sure that we all come with our A game every single time we're given an opportunity to shine. Thank you.
That's excellent. I open doors. I ensure that I always have a successor. I pull other women onto boards. I sponsor, but I also give tough love. I ask the difficult questions and hold them accountable. So Beth, I saw a lot of writing, so I'm giving you the floor now. What's your personal recipe when it comes to empowering women?
Well, thank you very much for the question. And I think there have been a lot of very interesting ideas. And I think that having women in leadership positions is so important, so people can see themselves in the leaders that they're engaging with. So I think having so many powerful women leaders here today is one of those recipes for empowerment. So thank you for convening, and it's been an honor to be with the rest of you today. Secondly, I think that it's important to ask women what they need. Don't assume. I've seen so many interventions and policies and programs that were designed to help women, but there wasn't enough time to really ask, what is it that you need to really drive the empowerment that you're seeking? And I think, just asking and making sure you take the time to get that data and do that diagnostic work, but involve really engaging and dialoguing with women that you want to help bring up and lift up with you. And then third is around data that was, I think, mentioned by my colleague Ndidi. I mean, we need to know, are our efforts, how are we impacting women? I think, again, there's a lot of assumptions. And I often see projects, oh, this project will empower women. Show me the data. I need the numbers. Every piece of data has got to be disaggregated by sex, and then outcome level indicators to show that empowerment that we're seeking. And we have to spend a lot more time, money, and effort on that to really understand the impacts we're having. Thank you again.
Beth, thank you very much. And I think it's a beautiful way to begin to wrap up our webinar, acknowledging the power of convening and creating conversational spaces. And so to thank, of course, AGRA, the AUC, to thank Her Excellency Fouad, and of course, Ambassador Sacko. Ask women, don't assume, engage in real dialogue with them. But I suppose one of the biggest points as we wrap up is we come back to this question of data. And if indeed the hashtag for the world is break the bias, the data allows us to see the real picture that gets rid of assumptions and allows us to really break the bias. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to invite the Vice President for Strategic Partnerships at AGRA and the Chief of Party of the Partnership for Inclusive Agricultural Innovation in Africa, that's PIATA, and that is Madame Vanessa Adams. She's standing by to give us her vote of thanks. Allow me to extend a special thank you to Dr. Beth Dunford, Madame April Whitman, and Didi Nunweli for their contributions in the CEO panel. Vanessa, the floor is yours.
Wow, so many powerful women, such excitement. I think somebody was saying that I have so many shoulders to stand on myself. I think to all of the women along the way who have supported me, challenged me, tough love, like Ndidi said. And I think what's the recipe for success? We've heard it from all of you. Raise your voice. Let's be stronger together. There's absolutely no way we can go alone. And we know how important it is to lean in, be a mentor. Many of you talked about supporting other women. I've read so many tweets online, and one of my favorite ones was, may we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. Let's be the women that our girl children, like Lindiwe said and Agnes was talking about, let's be the women that we want to lean into. And let's not make it be another 3-4 generations before we reach gender equity. We know we can invest in women. Let's show the way. Let's do it ourselves. Absolutely a dynamic, fantastic panel. This is the women at the table. We did have a few men who really wanted to be here with us. And we know that without all of you breaking the barriers and breaking the biases is not even possible. And so we really appreciate this fantastic dynamic panel. Will be live on YouTube and live videos tomorrow. If you missed us and you wanted to hear the beginning or even listen to this as your podcast, you're stuck in traffic, we hope that this becomes really a way to lean in. And for those of you who haven't seen, we've got a fantastic platform Value for Her. We really appreciate Sabdio's leadership in this. And of course, I can't believe Josefa Sacko spent all afternoon with us. Thank you so much. The African Union has really led the way. And you're joined, as you know, by Minister Geraldine and the representative of Canada, Anita Vanderbilt. Can you all just flip on your videos so we can have a fantastic, dynamic women leaders photo for our journalists online? And we want to see all your smiling faces. Sabdio, let's see you back. And Didi, I know you're running to another panel, but you can spare us 1 minute of your beautiful face as we, and April, thank you for your leadership. We know Hanneke is really behind you and supporting with all of the board of Unilever. It's very hard to do what you're talking about for 150,000 employees. And thanks to all of our dynamic agripreneurs and entrepreneurs who are with us today. So if you haven't gotten the message, invest in the women, lead the way, pick a few more mentors. If you haven't taken the time out of your busy days yourself, counting on all of you. Thank you so much and be fantastic end of the day, fun tweeting. And you can see we're all as we break the barriers, break the bias.
Goodbye. Thank you so much, Vanessa.